Hello, everybody, and good insert appropriate time zone, response. For me, it's good morning. Welcome to the Kubernetes by Example Insider Show, where we talk to people who are involved in Kubernetes, kind of on the ground. What we find is with open source projects, sometimes talking to the management teams around the project is not always sufficient to figure out where the project is going, because the beauty of open source is that if an engineer decides they really want to see a feature in, they can put it in nights and weekends, assuming it gets accepted. And so we try to get insights into what is planned for kind of coming up in whatever component, but also what the individuals that we talk to would really like to see happen, and so that you can have a better understanding of what's going on. Today, we're going to be talking about Kubernetes and IoT. And if you're unfamiliar with IoT, it is Internet of Things, which is kind of a shorthand for all those devices that often do like a single task that are kind of independent, but do various useful things like thermostats and lighting sensors and things like that. In fact, the new building that I'm sitting here, we have something like 300 scales for all the trash cans, and they measure all the trash that goes out of the building, and it all ends up in a dashboard. And so those are all IoT devices. So obviously that is a orchestration issue, to put it nicely. So today I'd like to welcome, and I don't know if I said my name. Did I say my name? I'm Langdon White, but I would like to also thank my co-host for joining me. Savitha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Savitha Raghunathan. I am a senior software engineer at Red Hat, and I was a guest once, and then I loved the show so much, and then I got the opportunity to co-host alongside Langdon. So here I am. I am excited to talk all things IoT today with Dejan. Would you like to introduce
Hey.
yourself?
Yes, so my name is Dan. I'm a software engineer with Red Hat. Been in open source for 15 years in different roles and different projects that involved for some time IoT as well and edge computing, and that's the topics I think we're going to cover today, right?
Yeah, pretty much. One thing we do like to kind of open up with, though, is like, what brought you to open source? Like, why did you get involved in open source in the first place, or how?
Yeah. So, I mean, previous to open source, I was working for a company building internal products like a lot of people, but you know, especially today, and it was the true 15 years ago. You depend on a lot of open source packages and projects out there, and that's where all the innovation is coming from. So as you grow as engineer, you get more and more involved into things that you're using. And at some point, I got an offer to start doing that full time. So I started in the Apache Foundation community, a project called Apache ActiveMQ, which is a message broker, still in use today a lot. And I was doing, I
A lot, a
liked
lot.
I like messaging and event-driven architecture. So that was really interesting thing to do. Then more and more people start trying to use ActiveMQ for IoT use cases. So trying to use MQTT protocol, trying to connect devices to the broker. And we had more and more customers trying to do that. So I kind of went a little bit more into specializing into that because I like the IoT topic in general. So we worked on that for a while, and then we joined Eclipse IoT Foundation, Eclipse Foundation IoT community. There was a lot of work going on there. I don't know how deep you want to go
No,
into
that was
this,
pretty good. I mean, it's kind of, I think what pulled you in, right, is
it's
basically
a
like
it's
that's
a
where the
natural,
innovation was happening.
it's a natural progression because we figure out after a while that scaling message brokers for IoT use cases, trying to connect hundreds of thousands or millions of devices, it's a hard thing to do So another approach was needed, and that we tried to dazzle into a topic of trying to figure out cloud connectivity for IoT use cases, right? So how can we build this infrastructure that can scale horizontally? And it was even before the Kubernetes days. So Red Hat partnered with Bosch. We were working a lot on a project called Eclipse Hono, trying to provide this connectivity layer for IoT. And more as Kubernetes became popular in the sense we first of all make it able to make Kubernetes first class citizen for our stuff, but got more involved with the Kubernetes community, and then there was the idea to start like a Kubernetes IoT working group, which from the beginning started to be like a IoT edge working group, because once you start talking to people that they're trying to do things with Kubernetes outside of the pure data center, you can see that everybody has a lot of different use cases, and that's a group like that was a good thing to discuss all these use cases and see how to apply different technologies for those different use cases. So I'll stop with the introduction for now.
Yeah. No, one of the things that I'm, what you made me think of is, so what is kind of unique about the kind of IoT world with regards to messaging? Like, I think, most people, who've worked in enterprise industry systems, right, have done something with message brokers at some point, right? Whether it's Apaches or one of the others. But so like, it's just another message. Like, why is IoT special?
Different, yeah. Well, I think best thing to say that is that communication patterns are different. So, for example, in a typical enterprise use case, you would have dozens, maybe hundreds of sites, bank, retail offices, and things like that you wanna connect, right? And those connections would be stable, fairly stable, and so you have like a couple dozen to 100 streams with large number of messages coming into it. Then you come to use case like, okay, how did I scale that to support hundreds of thousands of devices, which may be sleeping most of the time, wake up every 5 minutes, sends one small message and go down, right? Or things like that. So you have a scale of connections much different. So it doesn't mean that the scale of messages or volume of data is much different, but it's coming from a much wider array of sources.
Right.
Then you have
it's kind of more like the almost like the fabric or like the makeup of the messaging that's going around, right? Like it's maybe more sporadic, smaller messages,
exactly.
and a very high volume or a very high volume of sources, as well as like potentially a high volume of messages.
Exactly. Which are constantly coming and going. Then
right.
there's a thing like a large number of different protocols which are already there and not going anywhere. So instead of using your own client library, written in one or two languages, you need to support MQTT, COPS, maybe some things coming over UDP, and so that wide array of different protocols that needs to be supported. Security is also quite different because these things are usually not in your network. So if you think about enterprise messaging, you control your behavior, your environment, right? You can trust things much more than in a typical IoT to cloud, device to cloud, so to say, scenario. And then we have a different things. So we identified basically two general patterns. So this is the first pattern, saying telemetry, things going from the sensors into the cloud for further processing, right? That's one stream, and then you have the other stream going cloud to devices, which are usually called commands. So sending commands to like a shut this door or stop this AC and things like that. And also that has a completely different pattern of communication, which might not be the best thing to support with existing technologies. For example, one thing, so going back to telemetry, like those are usually fire and forget kind of messaging patterns. So if you miss a couple of readings of a sensor, it's not a big deal. You can, you should be alerted after a while, but it's not like a
It doesn't need reliability, really.
It's not financial information that you don't you mustn't lose at any cost, right? Which is most traditional message broker are built around. So it's more like having a huge pipe to get most of the data through that pipe, right? But on the other hand, commands going back are also kind of different, because you're sending that command and you don't know, there's a lot of point of failure that can happen in that system, even in the cloud. But even if the message reached to the device, do we know if actually the door has been shut or not? Based on just sending the message, we can't say that, right? So using something like a traditional queue for that is again not a good option. We don't know whether the device will be available now or in a 6 days or something like that. So some kind of like creating layers of communication on top of the messaging is needed anyways. Some kind of digital twin that will. That's where we are entering slowly into the Kubernetes land, like this operator pattern that you are trying to reconcile the state of your device with something that you have in your system is becoming more natural pattern to do these things, instead of just shoveling everything in a queue and praying that things will work out in the end, right?
So you're kind of eventually consistent config management in a sense.
Exactly.
for
Exactly.
for the door, which I think is
Exactly.
that's really interesting. Because you also
I think the IoT is like distributed system to the max, right? So because you're actually communicating with the external environment and physical world in a sense, right?
right. And how, like, what I also imagine, right, is that you also kind of end up with quite different patterns, for lack of a better term, or different constructs that you might need depending on kind of the use case, right? So like a thermostat needs to have a different kind of relationship, right, to the rest of the environment, either because kind of like in the thermostat case, right, pushing it up a degree or down a degree is probably not the end of the world. But if a door is supposed to be locked at 6 p.m., it better be locked, right? And then kind of the other scenario I was thinking about is one of the things that I've also seen a lot of kind of in the edge IoT space is also things like car automation, so like the computers inside cars. And so I wonder how much does that impact the, for lack of a better term, like the protocols or the tool chain or whatever, or is it really just, or is that just a matter of like how you program that individual scenario?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, in my mind, so one of the good things of IoT is that the use case has been known for like 20 years, so it's nothing new, right? So we're just trying to do it on a completely different scale. But all these things have been thought about by a lot of people over many phases of technology development. So the basic building blocks are I think well defined. So how you go to do these kind of things are similar. So it's basically just implementing that kind of like on another level, how your application will deal with I sent 3 messages. So I tried to reconcile to close this door for 6 times, and I still didn't get response back that they're actually closed. No, so that's the alert for someone to take a look and go to see what's going on there. But there's nothing I think on the technology side that can be done at that point, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, human in the loop on kind of a weird level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
have to tell something that when Langdon talked about the cars and when you said about the security, and all I could think of is that, have you seen the Fast and Furious movie where they will control all the cars and they will like make them like there is this one, I forgot the part, and they remotely control the cars. And that is my nightmare. That is my worst nightmare, that I always like think of cars driving. I mean, they already drive by themselves, but someone remotely controlling, that is the worst nightmare that I have.
Yeah.
Like when you are developing such protocols, or like working with IoT devices, do you like get concerns like this? Like someone says that, yeah, how do I trust this device? Yeah, my washing machine or my dishwasher is just gonna do its own thing, and I have this little app, and it's gonna come to my mobile and say like status and whatnot. But how do you? And then I also have like a security system, but the security system could also use, I don't know if they use IoT or not, or they IoT or not. I have to go back and check now that I think about it. But
Yeah.
uh,
So I think that's where we are entering the topic of edge computing, and because not everything should be connected to the cloud and not
Mhm.
immediately controllable by the cloud, so to say. So that's the next step. How do we, and that's the whole goal of edge computing in general. So how do we bring compute closer to the source of data, and how we close these control loops in a more secure way. And it's not just the security, but security is one of the big use cases. The other use cases is like bandwidth, for example. So talking about sensors is one thing, but if you're trying to send a video feed uh, up to the cloud and then process it there and then return results back, and try to do that for thousands of cameras and things like that, obviously the solution will not scale, and so the edge computing is the idea that we bring another layer into this device to cloud connectivity, so that we have some workloads running locally, geographically locally, so locally in your car, and some things that can't be changed or influenced by the by anybody outside of that environment, right? If that makes sense.
that is reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I was actually gonna kind of bring up is like, there's a relatively famous Twitter handle with a name I won't repeat, but Internet of we replace things with a bad word. Um, you know, one of the things that we hear a lot about, right, is that a lot of IoT devices do not have good security. Do you're a lot closer to it than I am, right? I just go kind of by the rumor mill. Is that still true? Is it getting better? I mean, I know it used to be really, really bad, but is it getting better? Can you still hack a thermostat very easily?
Yeah. I think it's getting better in a lot of ways. So I'm not that much into like consumer
Mm.
IoT and home automation, and for a reason, right? Because I think for a lot of people it's just a gimmick. For a lot of manufacturers, it's just a gimmick. So everybody is doing toaster that that it has a Wi-Fi, so we'll do it as well, right? To be competitive, but it's completely unnecessary feature. But looking at it from the open source perspective, there's a lot of things going on that's getting that's getting better in terms of security for IoT. So one thing is that I was involved for the last couple of years. So the Rust programming language is a big deal because it allows us to build even the firmware with a memory safety kind of environment, and that should help a lot with exploitability of firmwares and the small things in general. And I think, yeah, as time goes by, as like looking at the overall systems, more and more people are realizing that yeah, connecting everything to the cloud and then not being able to turn on the lights if you don't have a Wi-Fi, it's
Yeah,
it's not
not
a
not not very much fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
not
actually,
good
I
use
was
case.
I had a fairly decent or like kind of long conversation with one of the people who like kind of manages our building. And it's a really new building, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in place. And I didn't even really cross my mind. One thing that I thought was super interesting was like how much he knew about technology, right? Because of having to deal with like because in my office alone, right, I mean, I have a thermostat, and then I also have the lighting is also controlled, right? And but I didn't even think about the fact that those are both PoE, right? They're power over or Ethernet over power or whatever it's called. And which reduces a huge attack vector, right? Because they're not going over Wi-Fi, right? They are hard lined into the system. I mean, on the flip side, because that mean I can plug into the power and and try to access it that way. But it is kind of I think it's a really interesting space, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there.
So I think the solution for that kind of particular problem is using technologies like Bluetooth, Matter, and Thread, which are getting popular now. So these things that are basically local, so you need to provision them locally. It's all secured by the proper cryptography, and you need to onboard them on your network, but network, and then have some kind of the gateway to be able to get the basics of the whole system on your phone or over the cloud externally. But that should expose only a fraction of the whole functionality, and not in any way make it critical for that system to function properly, right?
Right. Yeah. All right. So, as much as I like talking about the IoT devices themselves, so kind of what's going on with that kind of IoT working group with Kubernetes?
Yeah. So at some point, so it's IoT and Edge working group, and because we started with this idea. I was coming from this world, and to me, IoT and the cloud was the big thing. But as soon as we got people in the room, you could see that that's not the only use case, and that's not even the primary use case that people had for IoT and Edge, right? And then we spent a lot of time trying to decide, and what is now 3 or 4 years later, like a common knowledge, like what are the different tiers of the Edge and different applications and different use cases. So that was one big question to just for starters figure out, when somebody comes to you and say I'm interested in edge computing, like, okay, what do you mean? like make a common vocabulary for everything, right? And today, we have that. So if you go like from the cloud down, right? So you have first what we call like a service provider edge. So that's the edge that telcos and other providers are interested in. So basically putting smaller data centers on their point of presence kind of things, right? Then you get into the space of the user edge. So the edge of the customers that are having their own infrastructure, and that can be quite different. So you again can have like a small data center to like a 3-node cluster to like a single node cluster, and I think that's where we're stopping with the edge. Like anything that's you can say like a device of the power of the Raspberry Pi that can run Linux and containers and things like that. That's something we would consider edge, right? And something that can be integrated into the whole this edge to cloud spectrum in a similar way. But then you have, as we said, like smaller devices with firmware and things like that. That's usually not considered edge part of the edge, but the external devices connecting to our system.
And so the working group is intended to define those things. Is that kind of the step
So
you're kind of working on, or?
yes, so that was the first step, and then we tried through different papers and talks and demos, try to figure out and show to other people where Kubernetes and other cloud native foundation technologies fits in that picture. So different use cases. One use case is, for example, what we talk in the first half of this session is like, how do we connect these devices, because it's not, traditional Kubernetes and cloud is HTTP. We are using browsers to connect everything. So now it's not. Now it's persistent MQTT connections or UDP connections. So how do we onboard this traffic there? Then how do we so how do we there's a different kind of challenges. So but to take one step back is what is edge computing and how it is different from like a traditional on-premise computing, right? So why we are now talking about all this? Because and I think that's significant saying that we want to people developers have the same tooling and same experience they are having in developing cloud native applications, to be able to develop workloads that can extend to the edges as well. So extending cloud infrastructure and the workloads basically with a similar tooling to the edge. So that was one of the main goals. I must say that I think 3 or 4 months ago, so the Kubernetes Edge working group has moved from the Kubernetes community to the more broader CNCF community.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now under SIG under TAG runtime, because in the last few years we covered all this. So you have all these kind of projects that popped up in the Kubernetes land, like KubeEdge, like K3S or Microshift and OpenYurt, and so people have figured out how to deploy Kubernetes on edge and operate it there. But then I think the next step is to figure out all these other things as well, like in a more broader sense. So how to do observability, how to do automate, CI/CD and GitOps and automation, and how to make things easier for people to do edge computing.
Well, I was actually, that was one of the things I was immediately thought of when you were kind of saying that, is like, if you want to bring the experience of, kind of a normal cloud native development to, IoT or whatever, like, how much are you having to deal with, kind of the difference between, traditional cloud applications and every other kind of application are not event driven, right?
Yeah.
And it is a pretty serious mind shift to think about your development in an event driven architecture. I think I had a huge advantage actually being a Windows developer many years ago, using COM, which is actually an event driven architecture inside the operating system. But an event driven approach to your application is quite different. I mean, I think, you can even tell with something like Node.js, right, which was built as an event driven architecture and then immediately had a plugin slapped on top of it to make it into a web server, right? Called Express. And never shall we see event driven in Node again. But I guess that's kind of one of the big things I would wonder about it. Or are you kind of, skating away from that by saying all cloud native is event driven? Or how do you deal with that in kind of the development style, or talking to people that hey, you have to think about the architecture kind of quite differently?
So that's one of the things. So we released a white paper a month or two ago. So CNCF edge native principles, where we try to like for starters, again, just help people put things in focus, what's important for application to be successful in the edge native landscape. So it's not just event driven. So when you start thinking about it, there's a lot of things. So first is a resource constraint. So a promise of cloud is unlimited scalability, right? Which is not the case if you have a 3-node Kubernetes cluster. So you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of your networking connection and the bandwidth. So it's not guaranteed that it will be there. That's where we're coming to these kind of things. Like you need to have a local cache and local feedback loop to be able to function while you're disconnected from the central cloud, right? And there's also heterogeneous hardware there, so it's not just a uniform thing. So you need to think about this if your application will run on ARM or x86 or both, right? And how you're going to approach that. Then the big difference is that you usually put your applications to the edge for a reason, and one of those reasons is to communicate with the external world, right? Which is rarely case in the cloud, with the exception of the GPUs. You really don't use any external hardware, right? But here you want to be able to access Bluetooth or USB cameras or whatever you're interested in to communicate with, right? So and then you need to think about those aspects as well. So how your containerized image will access all those resources, and that leads to another issue that's like a workload placement. In the typical cloud applications, it's mostly about horizontal scaling. So you just want to scale out when you need it, right? But for the edge application, you need to be much more deliberate about where you're placing your workload. So is this service make sense if this device doesn't have a Bluetooth or is it not connected to a proper camera? So it's not about it's not about just scheduling microservices wherever we have a place, right? It needs to go to this exact location for this application to make sense. So yeah, at this point we try just to summarize all these things and make sure that people are in a good shape when they're starting to plan to develop things like this, that they plan ahead.
Yeah, I think I actually threw the white paper, I hope, in the chat. And yeah, I mean, I think that's hugely important, because I think people don't realize how different kind of developing for event-driven scenarios is to kind of, I don't know, traditional development. I don't know what the opposite of event-driven is. But Savitha, I wanted to ask you, what was, did you have anything you wanted to ask about?
Sure. So I was wondering, like you explained a lot of concept to us, and it is half the things are new to me. So that has been like so helpful. But what would be the one advice that you would give for a contributor who wants to get started with one of these tags at the working group or something, other than bringing their passion, of course, and sometimes that they need to unlearn to relearn, right? You have to unlearn certain things to like actually do something good. So is there any kind of advice that you have for a new contributor who wants to get started with IoT and edge?
Yeah, so let me think about it. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I think learning by doing is the best thing, and failing along is a good thing too, right? So what I would do is, there's a lot of people doing their own home labs, right? That's a good topic. So you have a whole groups dedicated to that. So bring if you're interested in the infrastructure space, I think that's a good starting point. Trying to build a Kubernetes cluster out of 3 Raspberry Pis or Nook kind of desktop computers at home and see how it goes. That's for the edge part. For the IoT part, there's a lot of things like there. So there's a lot of existing boards and projects. So it'd be best to take one that it's most convenient for you, and just try to to connect it to your whatever infrastructure you want to be. It can be just a single HTTP server for starters, and then you can start thinking about, okay, now this is working, how do I go the next steps? How do I put that web server in a container and deploy it or on a K3s or Microshift or whatever, and try slowly to, because it's on the one thing, it's a very good topic because it's so wide, but on the other thing, that's the difficulty, because there's no single answer. It basically spans from the firmware to the cloud, and you get to decide what part are you interested in, and what other parts are you just going to pick from the community for the starters, until you get interested into that too, right? Because eventually you will.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's been very helpful. The information that you provided. I do have like 5 or 6 Raspberry Pis just sitting there, so I'm hoping that someday I'll just take it out. And I've been wanting to make my own mini Kubernetes cluster, like a home lab, and I have articles pinned that I want to do. So like one day I'm gonna give it a try. So thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up. It's a little
I actually
motivation and the
saw,
nudge I needed.
yeah, I think I saw I saw a speaker at a conference actually build one live on stage
Wow.
out of like 5 Raspberry Pis, which I was very impressed with. Like there's like demo gods, and then there's like demo gods with hardware, and you're like, oh my, like you're just asking for trouble, right? But yeah, totally. Did you want to? Was there more? Like, so I guess the other part of that question, right, is like, do you where how does somebody kind of get to, I don't want to say where you're at, but kind of like where, like how do you start to be a person who really is deeply embedded, especially in the IoT space, right? I think edge kind of as the topic sort of encompasses IoT, sort of doesn't. It's like a Venn diagram, but I think edge is getting a lot of press, right? And I think IoT, there's a lot of interesting going there.
The hype, the hypes.
Yeah, it's right. It's after the hype cycle, right?
But still got a
how do
lot
you
of
get
good
into
things
it?
going on.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, and I think there's going to be a lot more, right? I mean, because every single thing is going to be able to do something with tech, right? And so how do we, how do I get plugged into that space? So I build a little myself, but like, how can I kind of go to the next step?
Just I think not just for IoT and this, and I think we're getting back to the beginning of this discussion, like why do you get involved into the open source?
Mm-hmm.
That's the correct answer, right? You're starting where you are. You figure out what you don't know and you want to know, and you find the projects and people who are doing that. I never had an issue connecting with the people, and all people in open source in the communities are usually more than welcome to get you on board, and you just find the next thing.
Right. Yeah, I
find the
often
missing piece. So a couple of things I would I mentioned. We played with Rust a lot, so if embedded and system programming is your thing, I think a lot of things is going on there for the future. WASM is also one of, like, if you're talking about the topics like where the hockey puck is going, right, and you want to get ahead of the curve. WASM is also a very big topic for all these use cases. And I would advise people to start looking there. Also,
So can you elaborate actually on that specifically? Like, what's the correlation between WASM and kind of IoT? Like, what's, like how do they affect each other in a sense?
So I think it's again very early days still. Should we go a little bit about what WASM is? So it's
Yeah, a little bit. We've actually covered it on the show a couple of
okay.
times in the past already.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting. Now I just need a lot of free time.
Yeah. So I played just a little bit with it. So I wouldn't call myself any expert in that field, but like comparing WASM binaries and containers, for example, there's a lot of potential benefits there. For example, we're again talking about constrained devices, constrained networks, and bandwidths and things like that. And when you consider a typical container of hundreds of megabytes of size and the WASM binary, which is a megabyte or two, and with a similar functionality, you can see how it can have certain benefits for bringing that up to the constrained computing, right? The other thing is the sandboxing and security. Back to the original question about not messing with the cars. So I think there's a lot of work being done that in the community. So originally WASM was made for browsers and not meant to communicate with anything else. And that made it that a good sandbox secure environment that can't mess with anything outside for that. But for edge and IoT use cases and use cases on the edge, we, as you said, like we need to have permission to access our devices or access other things. And there's a thing called WASI, Web Assembly System Interface, which defines how the WASM binary can communicate with the system resources in a very constrained. Again, it's only can access something that you explicitly give it permission to access, right? So in that sense, that could be a much better proposition for those sensitive areas of accessing and running the workload on edge devices, so to say.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Savitha, did you have any other questions you wanted to ask about? I was because we did want to save a little bit of time to talk about KubeCon EU. But I wanted to see, was there anything else that we should talk about? Or Dejan, is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have asked you about?
Yeah, I don't know. I talked a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's good, right?
You are our guest of honor today, so I don't have. I think this session has so far been like so useful with so much information packed into it already. So I don't have anything, any other question to ask, other than what we covered. Yeah.
So I can give you a segue for KubeCon stuff, because there will be a collocated event, a Kubernetes on Edge Day, which our working group is helping to,
oh, cool.
be a program manager for that. So if you're all interested in that topic, you should consider that as well. It's specifically, I think, this time half day event, just about edge computing with Kubernetes.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to also kind of bring up, because I actually recently kind of gave a talk on campus, right, about just kind of a very brief introduction to Edge. And, when I give a talk, I tend to do a little research first. And I went to do the research, and I was just blown away by how much has changed in the last like 4 or 5
Yeah.
years. And so if you think you know what edge computing is at present, or IoT, right, or any of these related technologies, I would really recommend doing some research and see how much has changed, because there's a lot more going on there than certainly I realized.
And I think so. So our working group has bi-weekly meetings. I think it's Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, and it's a good place to hang out. So we try to source speakers from all these different projects, open source, that are doing something related to IoT and edge in the CNCF area. But even if we don't have an agenda, it's a really good source for like a birds of a feather conversations and exactly questions that you ask. Where do I start? I'm interested in this. Do anybody knows how to approach that? It's a good community to get involved into the whole topic. I can send you maybe a link to our.
I was just looking for one, actually.
Yeah.
But so I'll try to find it and I'll put it up. But I'm also going to put the co-located event. So I think, Gordon, are you here? Are you able to join us?
I am here.
Hello.
Hi, Dejan. That was amazing stuff. Thank you for sharing all that.
Thanks.
I definitely learned some things this morning. Although I'm like Savitha, I think I am a little terrified of cars taking over. And I think I remember, Savitha, that show you're talking. Is it so there was this show on, am I allowed to say Amazon on Prime? Yeah, of course I am. So there was a show on Prime called Upload. Do you remember that? So
no, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
I starred in the Fast and Furious movie. I like that franchise, so like I starred in that. But I will make a note and I'll go and
but that happened in Upload, and it was like the car took over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I don't know this IoT stuff, this edge.
There's a lot old joking saying that there's no much difference between the smart house and the haunted house. So that's the future.
That's terrifying, but thank you for that.
Well, guys, good to see you all. Wow, KubeCon is 3 weeks away. Can you believe it?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, right. So I was just looking at my calendar this morning, going, "Is it 3?" It is 3. So I think we're all trying to get everything wrapped up before that. But first and foremost, so Dejan, you're not going to be there in person, right? I don't believe. Okay.
Unfortunately, not this time. Yeah.
Yeah, next time, hopefully. But then at Langdon and Savitha, what I'm excited about is we actually get to meet in person. Looking forward to that. After all these endless virtual meetings with you guys, I get to see you face to face, and maybe even share some fun while we're there. So that'll be tons of fun. But Langdon, I don't know where you want me to go. I can give you some updates in terms of some exciting new KBE news, some fun things, some conveyor things, which I know Savitha is well tapped into as well. Where would you like me to start? Just kind of give a.
Well, I was gonna also mention I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but I have now discovered, when you're on virtual calls with people all the time, you can't remember if you've actually met them in person. And what I discover is when I meet them in person, if I'm wildly wrong about how tall I thought they were, that means I have not met them before, and I only know them which I think is kind of hilarious. But yeah, so to get started, let's maybe talk about the event itself, and maybe some of the because I know we're sponsoring at least one co-located event, and maybe that first.
Yeah, ArgoCon, the co-located event. We've got several things going on. I can tell it's just some bare basics, right? So what is it, April 18th through 21st in Amsterdam. So the RAI Exhibition Center there, just outside of downtown. So we're looking forward to that. Red Hat does have a heavy presence there. KBE, Conveyor, other upstream projects that we're involved with will all be there. So that's, I think, what we're really excited about, right? But from a KBE standpoint, let me start there. From a KBE standpoint, I don't want to reveal everything, but I do want to reveal some fun things. So, so we've got more than a couple of fun things going on. So first and foremost, If you guys are familiar with our KBE learning paths, you might know that we've got 17 learning paths that we've created over 2 years, almost 2 years time now. So a pretty broad realm of a pretty broad library. We're adding 2 new learning paths. So that'll bring us up to 19, almost 20. But the 2 new learning paths are going to be kind of fun. So KubeVirt, that's one of what we're going to announce. That should be ready in 3 weeks' time and up online. So, as you guys know, orchestrating VMs on the same infrastructure that you would containers. So obviously picking up a lot of speed with the community. So that is something that we've been asked by customers, by heck, just people in the community itself. Hey, is that something you can add to KBE? So yes, we can, and that will be there. So that's coming. Another learning path, Node.js. So Node.js, you guys know. So how's the best way to describe Node.js? JavaScript runtime environment and execution and more, right? So
yeah, and we were joking about it earlier, is that it actually supports event-driven architectures and is just never used that way.
Well, there you go. So Dejan, we could have used your help with this, I'm sure. But maybe, and going forward, you can always add your input to it. That's the fun thing about KBE, is these learning paths are always evolving and updating. And speaking of evolving and updating, so we've got several learning paths, some of which folks on the line here are involved with, that are being updated kind of in real time and in the weeks ahead as well. But everything from Kubernetes security, I know we've placed a big emphasis on that, on bringing some enhancements to that learning path. We've got Tekton. Langdon, I think you've been involved with the Tekton learning path. So we're furthering that and adding some enhancements, and even migrating to Kubernetes. And Savitha, I know you've been involved in that, right?
Yeah.
So so lots of fun work going on. So some good stuff going on with our learning paths. We're always trying to obviously update those and create new ones where the community needs them, and that's what we're doing with KBE. So that's going on. I would say at the event itself, that's probably the more fun stuff. So yeah, so a couple things. So KBE, OpenShift Commons. So on the day 0, we'll have a big OpenShift Commons that several of us will be involved with. Our friend and colleague, Karina Angel, is responsible for that. But we're involved as well. KBE is sponsoring the reception. So we'll have some fun, after event socialization and food and wine and more, right? So that will be there. Swag will be there. Conveyor will be on hand. SMEs from Conveyor, including Savitha and others, I believe. So that's all going to take place. We're excited about that. Booth presence. We've got a heavy booth presence for KBE, of course, in the Tuesday through Friday event on the booth floor. But also, Savitha, you might want to give us 2 cents on this, but there is a Conveyor kiosk for the first time. So that's going to be kind of fun, right?
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. So this is the first time that we have a kiosk for our sandbox project, which is Conveyor. And if you are interested in modernization and migration of your workloads to Kubernetes, then this is the place that I would say to start with, because I'm biased and I am a maintainer of Conveyor. So I'm just gonna get that out. But it is a great project, and so last KubeCon we had this theme of cars and whatnot. So I came up with this, that Conveyor is like the lane assist system for your modernization journey. And I've been sticking with that for a really long time because that makes sense to me. So if you want to learn about the project, we have a project kiosk in the project pavilion. I think it's booth number 24. So you can come on over there for some swag, learn about the project, see some cool demos that we have got. And if you're interested, you can even know about how to get started with the project. So,
and they can even meet you. Look at that. So,
oh yeah, that too.
Gets better and better and better. But
I was just looking for like an episode or whatever about Conveyor in case people are unfamiliar with it. We actually haven't done Conveyor on this show because when we interviewed Savitha, we actually interviewed her about release engineering. But on my old show that I used to do for Red Hat, the Level Up Hour, I did end up. I know I interviewed some people, so I'm going to look for a link for that. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of, maybe we should do a conveyor episode at some point.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we could bring on some engineers, have it like a panel, and that would be like cool. And we briefly, Langdon, I don't know if you remember, we briefly talked about it in our car interview.
Oh, right. I thought we had covered it somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you check out the Detroit car interviews, which is, I'll throw that link in the chat as well. But when we drove around in the car and interviewed people about Kubernetes in Detroit, which was really entertaining. No geese or other birds were killed. I did not go to Canada by accident. All of these were deep concerns during the trip. So it's definitely worth checking out. But I will try to link that particular conversation in the chat.
Okay, good segue, Langdon, into the final point I wanted to make about the fun stuff going on in Amsterdam. So, okay, without revealing the actual brand, because I promised Tam I wouldn't, I will tell you that, okay, as Langdon finds these fun Detroit car interviews, which we called KBE Insider on the road, right? Because it was basically taking this episode and giving it, on the road. And people like Savitha and quite a few others, there you go, Savitha and Langdon talking about conveyor. There's a perfect example, right? So we've got several of these lined up for Amsterdam as well. And we do have, and Langdon, I don't know if you know this, but 700 horsepower. This is supposedly the fastest car that this particular brand makes. That's what I've been told. And I've even been asked, can Langdon handle this horsepower? I don't know.
I know. I'm a little, it sounds very interesting. I think I would much rather be driving it in, say, the middle of nowhere, the US, right? Rather than kind of the outskirts of Amsterdam. But yeah, this should be exciting. I have driven a large number of different types of vehicles, from moving trucks to, I used to do a lot of theater work and small cars and big cars and minivans and vans. And so hopefully it should be all right. I just want to be able to have plenty of practice before.
There you go. There you go. Well, I did ask specifically for the minivan version for you, and they said, nope,
Thank you.
We're giving Langdon the E, and then I won't complete the rest. I'll say, I'll whet the appetite of the audience here. Tune in, I guess it'll be 3 weeks' time, and we can officially unveil what we're doing in Amsterdam, what car manufacturer we're working with. All I'll say is it's a major German car manufacturer with their high production VW Golf. I don't know, Tiger. It's going to be exciting. So, and Langdon's going to wear a crash helmet and everything else. It'll be tons of fun. So we'll have lots of folks there. I think, we're finalizing the roster as we speak of who will be interviewed, but we're all looking forward to that. So that's, if we thought Detroit was fun with the Ford, which it was, I think this is going to be equally fun. So lots, I guess, bottom line, I'm really looking forward to KubeCon. Lots of great stuff coming up. Can't wait to meet some new people who I've only seen virtually for 3+ years now. And that's sure. The KubeCon update.
Yeah. The only thing I'm a little, it might have been kind of cool if we're trying to figure out a way we could do the interviews on bikes, being Amsterdam, but how do you talk to somebody on a bike? Is it, if you do a tandem bike, then you're like in front of, and obviously it got very complicated very fast. So we went with the more traditional driving mechanism, despite Amsterdam and its love of bikes.
We did, and we were even considering like the little, hey, maybe we'll get like a boat in the canal or something and have it that way. And there were all kinds of fun ideas. But in the end, I think we found our spot. I think especially with this auto stuff. And plus, I mean, again, Langdon 700 horsepower, you can't match that on a bike.
Oh yeah, no, I'm pretty excited. I will say I'm pretty stoked. Those electric cars, man, they drive so differently if you haven't tried one. It's really very weird. So cool. Well, with that, why don't we call that a show? Thanks everybody for coming, and we hope to see you either in Amsterdam for KubeCon or at the next episode. And have a lovely day.
Bye guys.
Take care, folks.